Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 125 of Level Up, 60 minutes of live Q&A where your questions chat and votes drive the show. My name is Stephan Brendel, and I'm a regional manager at APMG. As we get underway today, please let our social team know your name and the city you're joining from. As always, we really love to get to know our audience and get everyone involved. My colleagues, Ella and Adriana, are online, and they will post a link in the chat to vote up the questions that you would most like answered, and of course, for you to add your own questions. If your question is selected, your name will appear in the credits at the end of the show. So get yours in early and stay with us to see that happen. Also, please do take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps new people discover our content. The topic for today's show is how to build a culture of collaboration. We all feel that a collaborative culture fosters innovation by bringing out the best in employees. When we believe we are contributing to a team effort, we are more energized, productive, and adaptable. Collaboration creates a sense of community and participation. As a result, we feel more satisfied and less stressed. In short, collaborative employees are also engaged employees, and engaged employees will stay loyal to the organization they work for. In addition to employee retention, a reputation as a collaborative organization can also help in attracting talented employees. So how can you build this culture of collaboration? Today's panel have a wealth of experience in this topic, so please do take advantage of having this expertise available to you and send us in your questions. Okay, let's then get straight into the show and meet today's panel. Hello, panel. I start with Malini Jayaganesh. She's a returning panel member joining us from Melbourne. Malini is a highly experienced business relationship manager. She specializes in nurturing high-performant BRMs and teams and facilitates APMG-accredited BRM certification courses. In her spare time, she writes about food, culture, and relationships. One of Malini's proudest achievements in recent times has been supporting her team to achieve 6 Hall of Fame inductions. Thank you for joining us, Malini. Hello.
A very happy New Year's to you, Stephan, and to all members of the panel, as well as everyone who's tuning in from around the world.
Thank you, Malini. Another returning panelist is Daniëlle Hellebrand, joining us from the Netherlands. Daniëlle is the owner and CEO of BetterBrains at Work. She holds a master's degree of cognitive neuroscience and specializes on coaching executives, while she's also a columnist, podcast host, and professional keynote speaker. She has a passion in applying discoveries in neuroscience about the social brain to encourage her clients to make practical use of these findings. She's on a mission to create more brainwise and inspiring workplaces where people can work with their brain and their heart. Goedemorgen, Daniëlle.
Goedemorgen, Stephan. Thank you, Stephan, for the introduction. And I'm looking forward to today's show. And what a great topic to start the week.
Yeah. Completing our panel today is Laurie Bowman, joining us from Brisbane, Australia, for another episode. Laurie has 30 years of experience in engineering and management roles on complex multidiscipline engineering and construction projects. He's also a trainer and advisor on planning, assurance, risk management, and control for projects, programs, and portfolios. Welcome back, Laurie, and thanks for the beautiful sunny live background for you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Stephan. It's very good to be here, and I'm looking very much forward to this topic.
All right, thanks, Laurie. Our question master for today is Suchitra, who's joining us from Bangalore in India. Hello, Suchitra.
Hello, everyone, and hi, Stephan. Great to be back again. Looking forward to today's show.
Well, then, may we have our first question, please?
Sure. Our first question is from Henrik Agent, who wants to know what are the characteristics of a culture of collaboration?
Okay, Malini, why don't you start us off, and then Laurie? And then
Hendrik, what a great question to get today's discussion started. What are the characteristics of a culture of collaboration? Well, I could write a very long list, but I will leave something for my fellow panelists to also discuss. So, what I would like to say is at the heart of a great culture of collaboration is the belief that everyone has that we actually achieve better outcomes by working together. Right? If people truly believe that, then they'll be able to work out the processes, the systems, etc., etc. The rules through which they will actually collaborate. But at the heart of that is that belief that when we work together, we actually can achieve a lot more.
All right. Thank you. To start us off, Malini, and next will be then Laurie.
So first, I agree with Malini's comments, and I would add that people are made to feel welcome. That there's a very much an intention to encourage and welcome people, and that when there's a really effective culture of collaboration, people go in with the intention to listen, not to preach, not to tell others what to do or how it should be, but to listen to how others feel so they can learn and take on insights.
All right. Thanks, Laurie, for these insights. Daniëlle.
Well, culture is a collaborative thing, and where we all have to contribute. And there are a few characteristics, I think. It starts with trust, with psychological safety. Am I feeling safe enough to speak up, to ask for help if I need your help? Am I able to speak up when something doesn't work out that well? Is there transparency? So we don't get these strange thoughts in our head and having these feelings of fear. If there is a collaborative culture, we all are able to share our knowledge, and just not play zero-sum games. And also, as managers of leaders of a team, we have to walk to talk, practice what you preach. And also, as Laurie said, communication is so important. A lot of companies say, well, I communicated. Why do they do the things I want them to do? Well, no, you did not communicate. You gave an instruction, you told people what to do. And communication is a two-way street. So there are a lot of characteristics. But for me, one of the most important things is that you feel there is this energy of trust, of psychological safety.
Thanks, panel. What a great insight with the first question already. So thank you very much for this. Suchitra, I hope that Hendrik is happy with this. Hendrik, when you listen to us, but how about the next question?
A question from Rose. In your opinion, is the most principle of collaboration, trust, empathy, positivity, clarity, or accountability?
So Daniëlle and then Laurie.
Rose, thank you for these questions, because it's all of that. It is empathy and positivity and clarity and accountability. It's a lot of things. And you really, as I said earlier, you have to walk the talk. You really have to spread the energy that there is empathy, positivity, clarity, accountability. And there are so much more things. So there are all of the utmost important. And the most important thing is, do you really give that feeling of trust and energy? Is that there in your company? So everyone feels the things that you written down in your question. So all of them, Rose, and much more.
Okay, good. Well then, Laurie, how about your thoughts?
I agree that they all are very important. If I had to say which one was most important, I would almost say that trust is the outcome. It's almost like the holy grail. And once you've established trust, so much can happen. And the mechanism to establish trust is through empathy, positivity, clarity, and accountability. So they're very complementary and overlapping. But I really think trust is, if you had to pick one, I'd go for trust slightly over the others.
All right. Well, thanks, Laurie. So you open up the ranking with putting trust on top. Malini, what's your thoughts on that?
Laurie just spoke what was in my mind. I think I do agree with Daniëlle. All of these principles that Rose has listed are important. But when you have empathy, positivity, clarity, accountability, etc., you will end up building trust. One other principle or value that I'd like to add to this is respect, right? Because you build collaborative relationships, through creating conditions for mutual respect, and I think that's really important.
All right. So maybe we can summarize to Rose that it is like trust is the result of all the things you mentioned plus respect. Okay, thank you very much. And then, Suchitra, let's go to our next question, please.
We have a live question from Diane. Are team building and sensitization workshops sufficient to encourage collaboration in multinational and agile organizations?
All right, so Daniëlle starts us off. You're very fast this morning, Daniëlle. And then Laurie.
I had a good night of sleep. Thank you, Diane, for this question. In my experience in all those years, I think as a company, one of the most important things is who are we going to put in a position with power? It starts with that. Who is responsible for a team and for an organization? And does that person walk the talk? And is that person also able to put his or her ego a little bit aside, to show vulnerability, to show that there is compassion and trust, etc., etc. And of course, competence is also very important, but also emphasis on the type of person who is in charge. And then there are all those things you mentioned. Of course, sensitisation workshops, looking at the me, who am I? What are my strengths? And what are the things I'm not so good at? That's also a very important thing. And is there enough trust, there we are again, that I'm able to ask for help to my supervisors, to my managers, and to my colleagues? So it takes some work and encouragement. You have to facilitate that. But an important thing, as I said in the beginning, is who is responsible for the team. Who do you put in a position of power? Does he or she walk the talk?
All right. Oh, okay. Thanks, Daniëlle. Laurie, how about your thoughts?
Well, firstly, I agree on the importance of leadership and for them to demonstrate, for leaders, the opportunity for leaders to demonstrate the right collaborative type of behaviour. In addition to team building exercises, which I haven't specifically been involved in, team building exercises for the point of team building, but what I've seen very useful is things like risk and opportunity workshops within projects. As a byproduct of these workshops, if they're run well, really are very, very useful team building exercises, because you'll have different groups, different individuals with different values, and they'll come in, they'll have to collaborate. Typically, there'll be a conflict between the interests of two different groups, and they'll have to settle on a compromise and come up with a holistic plan. So certainly planning workshops, risk and opportunity workshops In my experience, when they're run well, if they've got a good leader, as Daniëlle pointed out, I think can be really effective ways for helping build that team cohesion and collaboration. The other aspect, I guess, extending on what Daniëlle said, for the opportunity for people to understand themselves really well. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Where am I developing? And when it comes to multinational collaboration, extending that and even having a mindfulness of different cultures and different countries, how some of those behaviours can be a little bit different. Something I found very interesting, learning about 7 years ago, was Hofstede's Cultural Index, where there's factorial analysis that's been done from people from different countries that shows there's certain types of behaviour, certain ways that we respond when there's a significant difference in power relationships, or a different orientation between short-term versus long-term thinking, that different countries tend to exhibit as well. So to be mindful of that when we're working in multinational teams, and making sure that we're understanding ourselves well, but also trying to be empathetic and understand the cultures of some of the other players who we might be working with as well.
Oh, thanks. Laurie, yeah, that reminds me of the APMG, that we are a multinational company as well. And yes, I exactly know what you're talking about. Thanks. Malini, your thoughts?
Diane, it's really great that you're joining us from Trinidad and Tobago. I think I agree with everything that Daniëlle and Laurie have said, right? And I think there's a place for workshops. There are points in time when people will come together, with a certain purpose, in mind, and there'll be some activities all geared around that. And as Laurie rightly said, sometimes you might actually bring together groups that have different points of view. So hopefully by the end of the exercise, they'll be on the same page. The trick, I think, is to actually ensure that is sustained beyond, those new ways of thinking and new aspirations to collaborate. That you want to actually ensure that they extend beyond these workshops, and they actually become part and parcel of this is how we work every day. Right? And being able to sustain that momentum, embedding that into your day-to-day work practices, I think that is actually really, really critical. And this is where sometimes I find organizations trip up, because they bring in consultants who run these workshops, and it's very exciting, and people forget about what they learned or what they experienced soon after that, and they really struggle to apply it on a daily basis. And I'm really glad Laurie mentioned Hofstede, because Hofstede's work on cross-cultural management is sort of my go-to framework as well. When I work with multinational organizations and I do cross-cultural training, he's written a wonderful book. I'll drop the link in the comments, and I would recommend it to everyone who's interested in building cross-cultural collaboration.
Oh, thanks, Malini, and thanks for mentioning Hofstede. But we have a lot of questions to answer, so let's just move on with the next one. Suchitra, please.
A question from Sean. How do you fix a culture where collaboration isn't happening and the environment feels toxic?
Oh, okay. Daniëlle, Laurie. Okay, and then Malini.
Oh, Sean, I feel you. I worked too many years in a toxic culture and I didn't know how to get out. So my first question would be, is it just you who are not in a very good place and it feels toxic, or are other people also sensing that? And I think toxicity in a culture is a systemic thing, and it's really, really difficult to get out, because as we know from brain research, neuroscience, that if there is a culture of fear and toxicity, people are afraid. And with an anxious mind, people cannot feel straight. They have just this huge anxiety feelings in their brain and their nervous system and in their whole body. So people cannot think clear. To put it a little bit bluntly, in a culture where there is a lot of toxicity, people are not smart because it blocks all doors in our brain that we need to think and feel properly. So there's not much good coming out of that. So how do you fix it? I don't know. And I can tell you, I have a lot of experience with that. One of the things I did, and sometimes if the shit hits the fan, you can get out. But that's the last thing one should do. But a toxic culture, it's oh, I feel with you. It's so difficult. And I wish there was 3 steps to get out of that or to fix that. But you need a lot of people who are aware of that, who dare to put the elephant in the room and say, this is going on. This is what we feel. We cannot work like that. And that takes courage and it takes power. And often if there's too much toxicity, people just don't dare to speak up. They're afraid. They're afraid to admit something. So that's why it is so difficult to get out. And that's why I'm sorry. I hope my other panelists have something more to contribute. It is difficult, John. Take care.
And it's thanks, Daniëlle. And it sounds like you better choose your battles wisely, that you fight before make a decision to get out or not.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Daniëlle. And Laurie.
Yes, it's interesting listening to Daniëlle talk about fear as being the root cause, and when she was talking about the enabler as being psychological safety. In other words, making people feel safe is the cure, and fear really is part of the problem. I'm very lucky to have seen a couple of examples where a toxic culture, if you like, got turned around. One of them, we had a program director who introduced, so that the team was struggling. They were on a very complex project. They were, most of the leaders were afraid to share bad news. So they were always hiding bad news, and this sort of fear was really growing in the team. We had a new program director who came in, who brought in a new culture they called Help Needed. So every month when the leaders would report their progress, instead of it being all about cost, schedule and scope, he introduced a 4th area that was help needed. So the leaders would come in, report on cost, schedule and scope. They would also share what help they needed, where they needed resources, complexities that they were struggling with. And when they shared these problems or these help neededs, he would dive in and do his best to help them and support them. So it was a very interesting program in terms of a huge turnaround, a 180-degree turnaround in the culture. Another example, and that was really down to one individual, one very good leader who understood how important it was for teams to feel safe. Another example, I was very lucky to be involved in a program, and we had an organisational psychologist come in and help us. They were from an organisation called Human Synergistics, and they did they actually did a survey, or a cultural survey on the organisation, and they had a very simple system that would measure the health or the culture of the organisation using 3 very simple categories: constructive, being teams and individuals who could deal with problems and differences and solve problems together. There was aggressive, which meant that people were tended to prioritise their own interests and put that ahead of the organisation. And then there were passive people, which were just as damaging as the aggressive people. And these would be people who would not express anything. They would just go with the flow, whatever was happening with the organisation, and wouldn't be very proactive. And by measuring these 3, by conducting surveys, they could measure these 3 attributes and then monitor them over time. So with this particular organisation I was involved with at the time, we came up as a very passive organisation, which is a little bit quite common with government sort of organisations. but it really gave us a good benchmark. And with organisational psychologists, we worked on psychological safety that Daniëlle was touching on before. Another interesting one was storytelling. So having leaders who were prepared to tell stories and be vulnerable of a group, which really helped others who were on the program to also realise that it was okay to be vulnerable, to share problems and things like that, and to work together. So yeah, two very tough situation being in a toxic environment, but there certainly are some solutions out there.
Thanks, Laurie. Yeah, looks like we all have been in a situation where we have perceived some kind of toxic environment. Malini, your thoughts?
So, evolving culture is one of the key things that business relationship managers do, within organizations. So this is something that we sort of discuss extensively as part of the business relationship management professional course. And Sean, I don't know what your personal situation is, but if you have some degree of control over the situation, right? It doesn't have to be you don't necessarily have to be the person responsible for fixing all the cultural problems in the organization, but to the extent that you have some influence, right? Some of the things that you could consider doing are reviewing, what sort of language do we use in this organization? And can we, if we make small changes to the language, does that actually, lead to some shifts in behavior? So, for example, I worked in an organization where different teams within the technology division, they were just working in silos, right? They were simply not keeping each other informed. Left hand wouldn't know what the right hand was doing, and over time there was a lot of animosity that was created because of these behaviors. So one of the things, one of the key characteristics, right, that I noticed when I went into this organization was that when there's a process that actually involves multiple teams, one team would work on it and they would simply throw things over the fence, literally, to the next team, right? It wasn't actually a very smooth handover, not setting them up for success. And sometimes these teams would actually refer to each other as clients. I started using the word partner. I said, well, these are teams we partner with. What are we providing to our partners, etc. And whenever someone used the word client, I would actually try and gently correct them and encourage them to use the word partner. And that actually, over time, did get people to start thinking quite differently about the teams that we work with. That they are really partners. That we should be, figuring out a way to work with more effectively. So Sean, perhaps that is something that you could try. It's a small thing, but please don't underestimate the impact that it can have.
Oh, thanks. Great guidance, Malini. Thank you for that. Daniëlle, you mentioned you would like to add something to that.
Thank you, dear Malini and Laurie, for giving example where it did work. The things I was talking about is if leadership doesn't see and feel the toxicity because they don't really care, and if they are themselves toxic, because the beautiful examples you mentioned, there are a few people who see and feel, who are in a position to do something about it, to get a consultant, a psychologist, to take in someone who is experienced in business relationship management. These are the examples where there are openings and where there are people who see and feel it and want something to do about it. The maybe a bit extreme examples I mentioned was where there were people in a certain position who could do something about it, but just didn't want to see it. They said, we have an open culture, we work together, there's a lot of wonderful communication, etc., but it was window dressing. It was window dressing. And in your beautiful examples, there were people who really felt it, who saw it, and who did something about it. And the example I was mentioning was where people in certain position just didn't see it or didn't want to see it.
Wow, thanks panel for these very good insights. And Sean, what a question you brought up. So thanks for that. Suchitra, why don't we move on?
We have another question from Henrik Aiton. Are there any ideas a panel can share about how to break the barrier between lip statements of collaboration and actual daily life in an organization?
Well, panel, I think the previous question or your answers to the previous has covered a little bit, but maybe you want to add something, then this would be a chance to reply to Hendrik. Laurie, why don't you give us a start?
Well, it is a very tricky one. So it's always, so by lip statement, so if there is somebody who has a goal or an aspiration for collaboration, that really is a good thing. And that really is the starting point, to have a vision and to verbalize that, particularly if it's coming from a leader. That next step really is, once that vision is established, in the practice of it. So really embedding it within teams and within an organization and creating those opportunities. So it's one thing to create that vision. The next step is to get on the mission of actually delivering that. And whether that means the leader who has that aspiration needs to create that environment and demonstrate it in some way, that really is the next step in the process.
Right, thanks, Laurie. And Malini, you would like to add something?
I think Daniëlle raised a really great point in the previous question that, we can only make change when, there's some conditions in place. There must be at least some people that actually acknowledge that we need to have collaboration, that we need to fix the culture. So Hendrik, I'm going to assume that in the case of your question, that there is some desire in the organization to break that barrier, right? And they actually want to get on ahead. Something that I do with teams, which really works very well. I actually get them to work individually and collaboratively around specific questions, addressing barriers to good collaboration. So first I get them to, think about all the barriers to collaboration that there are, and then I get them to sort of go, how might we, remove this barrier, or how might I remove this barrier? And you'll be surprised, right? Senior leaders actually do not need to come up with all the answers. Right? That's not their role at all. Actually, all the people who work on the ground often would come up with the best answers, because they are the people who are, who are, who have the best knowledge. They're on the ground. But what leadership needs to do is to actually create safe spaces where, candid conversations can occur, where there's respectful listening, and they need to make sure that they walk the talk, right? So I would suggest, Henrik, you could even just have a, make this, like a themed thing, like a themed conversation that you have at regular intervals. How might we, address one of the collaboration challenges?
All right, okay. Thanks for the guidance then. Suchitra, I think Hendrik should be happy with this reply, including the previous question. Okay, so we go to the next one.
Our next question is from Paul. Do you have any tips or suggestions for building a collaborative culture with hybrid or remote working arrangements?
Hybrid or remote working arrangements. Okay, Laurie, please kick us off on this one. And then Malini.
Well, this is a really tricky one, obviously. And I think, or certainly for me, my experience going through COVID, I learnt a lot about this. And it really is, I think there's an increased need to check in with people. So often there's a lot of social cues and things like that you pick up in the office that aren't so accessible when people are working remotely. So having more regular meetings, shorter meetings, which they do generally tend to be when they're virtual, in my experience anyway, but having them more regularly and asking questions. Very, very similar to Malini's point earlier on about asking people how to overcome communication challenges, asking people at the same time, how are you going? Is there anything that we can do to improve things and that sort of thing? Another in project work, which is the majority of the work that I do, is it's really more important to keep things simple. So a lot of the complexities of sort of project life, you can sort of deal with them when everyone's co-located and they're naturally taking things in and picking things up from each other, but more so than not when teams are working remotely, keeping things simple I've found to be a more important principle to just to avoid the risk that people are going to be sort of drifting off and doing their.
All right. Thanks, Laurie. And Malini, please.
Paul, your question is so topical. This is something that we are all, grappling with ever since the pandemic, has started. And I agree with everything that Laurie has suggested. What I would also, what I would also add to that mix, right, is transparency, right, which I referred to that earlier. It's one of the building blocks of collaboration, right? I can't really collaborate effectively with someone if I don't know what they're doing, where there might be some overlap or touch points in our work where we could collaborate, etc. So it's really important when you're working in a hybrid mode that everybody is still able to make their work quite transparent, and you could do that through regular stand-ups, using shared spaces to keep track of the work that's being done, go through a process of collaborative conversations for prioritization and problem solving. All of those things will certainly help. Something else that you also need to be quite mindful of when we work in a hybrid mode is that we need to keep multiple channels for communication open, or multiple modes of communication open. So, people who are joining a meeting remotely, for example, there's a very high risk of them being too quiet, not getting an opportunity to participate in meetings. So whoever is facilitating the session needs to be very mindful that they actually give everyone an opportunity to provide input, right? Share their insights, contribute to decision making, etc. And you might also want to consider that some people might be comfortable speaking, some people might actually be more comfortable in writing. So you might have to come up with different ways in which people can actually participate in that in conversations, right? So be more purposeful about how you bring people together and how how you can get the best out of everyone. I think that would be my tip for you, Paul.
All right. Thank you. And then Daniëlle, please. Your thoughts.
When we are talking, I was thinking, aren't we a little bit mixing up collaboration and cooperation? Because for me, cooperation is you help me with something, but that I'm responsible for, and vice versa. And for me, collaboration is more like a shared ownership and a shared interest in outcome. But, at the end of the day, teamwork is the key to success, but it's a challenge in itself. It requires that people manage their egos, develop humility, communicate effectively, resolve conflicts, and above all, commit to one another and to a common goal.
Okay. Thank you very much. Suchitra, why don't we move on to the next question then?
Your question from Ross: what techniques can be used to balance levels of collaboration with people who are more extroverted and people who are more introverted?
Well, that's an interesting view. Laurie, how about sharing your thoughts first?
Thank you, Ros. This is a really good question and a very common dilemma when you're looking for collaboration, and you'll have a lot of people coming in with all sorts of enthusiasm and things like that. And I think Malini actually touched on this a little bit with the last question, and it's about just having that awareness, particularly if you're a leader who might be responsible for coordinating the collaboration or anything like that, to be aware that everyone has different communication styles, and some people will feel more comfortable. Some people learn by actually speaking and verbalizing their thoughts, and that there might be others who might have extremely useful and valuable ideas to share with the team, but they might be doing it internally, processing and things like that. So creating the opportunity either by giving those individuals space, asking them individually, and even giving them different forums to express themselves. So, for example, by responding to a survey or providing a written submission, rather than sort of putting them on the spot and asking them to sort of compete with other voices that might be in the room and things like that. So, being aware that you've got different personality styles, and some people like to engage in different ways, and creating those pathways for people to share their ideas through different mediums.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Laurie. And we might sometimes hope that this is not too much artificial to encourage other people, a bit more introverted, but good advice. Thanks. Daniëlle.
Ross, indeed, beautiful questions, because there are very extroverted people, very introverted people, and everything in between. There are a lot of shades of gray. And there are also ambiverts who are sometimes extrovert and sometimes introverted. And extroverted people, they arrange their mind and their way of thinking by speaking, and maybe think at a certain point, oops, maybe I should have thought first before speaking. And the more introverted people need some time to digest before they say something. For me, I work with a wonderful tool. It's called Mapstyle, and it's associate cartography. And we work with people because we're all travelers in our own life. And there are a lot of travelers with us on this journey called life on the planet. And we do it very interactive. And we travel through our own life and the way other people see things and the other way people express themselves. So there are a lot of tools for that. But also knowing from yourself if you're more an introverted person or an extroverted person, and knowing that from your colleagues or the people you work with, it is so helpful. That I also give the people who are more introverted time to speak, take a little bit more time to let them reflect on their thoughts or say certain things. And not just because we live in a very extroverted society, and the people who are the loudest, take the most space. And unfortunately, we listen too often to them. So also be aware of the beautiful minds who are a little bit more introverted. And there are a lot of tools to do that, but we've got to be aware of that.
Okay, thanks, Daniëlle. Yeah, don't we know all these kind of people who just look like being introverted, say very few things, but these things really matter and are really in substance? And then there's the opposite, of course. Malini, please, your thoughts.
Roz, I love your question because, what you're essentially, acknowledging is that we cannot take a one-size-fits-all approach. That there's diversity, in organizations, and you have called out one type of diversity, extroverted versus introverted, but different, people can have all sorts of different ways and needs in terms of collaboration. So an experience that I had quite early on in my career. Now, when I think about it, I think it's funny, but I once worked with a manager who was a first-time manager, and she felt that we needed to have more collaboration in the organization, and so she started doing two things. One, she would copy everyone in every email, right? And we would have meetings every day, and everyone would get invited. Everyone, as in everyone she could think of. What that ended up creating was it put off a lot of people. It was just too much noise, and we didn't really, get to good outcomes. And I've reflecting on that experience, I've since learned that one way to cater for that was an extreme example, right? But in the case of, say, extroverted and introverted people, for example, one something to consider is perhaps you actually need to balance meetings and in-person engagements and so on with some days when it's quiet. Okay, when I say quiet, I mean relatively quiet. So for example, you might have a meeting free Friday, for example, right? So that actually gives people who draw their inspiration or sense of fulfillment from quietness. It gives them sufficient time, to focus deeply on something that they consider important, without actually having to feeling obliged to attend many meetings. So there's actually these days quite a lot of material out there, a lot of books that have been published on quiet people versus less quiet people, introverts versus extroverts, Roz. So I think you're onto something really good there. So keep digging into that a bit more.
Thanks, Malini, and thanks, panel, for great guidance to Ross about this particular question. Suchitra, we have time for at least one more question, right?
Yes, and we have a question from Jane. Which team building activities have you seen succeed at building rapport and collaboration in a team, and why were they successful?
Okay. So, panel, who dares to make the first attempt for replying to this question? Okay, so it's Laurie and then Malini. Thanks. And then Daniëlle.
So my example, it's not specifically a team building activity, but it's a nice little icebreaker that I use in project planning and risk management workshops. It's called the secret recipe party. It's particularly useful if you've got a group of people from different backgrounds who don't know each other very well. And basically, you have a bag which will have a whole suite of different ingredients in it. So it might be sugar, basil, chili, garlic, noodles, chicken. And everybody within the group needs to pull out one of the ingredients and they keep it to themselves. And you then ask the group to go around and find other people who they think might be suitable for making a dish. But you're not allowed to tell people what's on your card. You can only give a clue. So, for example, if yours was sugar, you could say, oh, I'm very small and white and sweet or something like that. And you go around and form the teams, then go around and form groups of people who they think might be suitable for creating a dish. And then once the teams have found their group, they share what their ingredients are, and they need to collaborate together to come up with a dish, and then they pitch it to the wider group to say what their dish is. And the reason I find it really useful is, firstly, it gets teams talking to each other and mixing and mingling, but it actually becomes a bit of a metaphor in itself for the way that you want teams to work on projects. It helps teams realise that you need a mixture of different ingredients. So you need diversity in ingredients. You need to take on different ideas and come up with things. So for me, that's a nice little icebreaker that I've found, particularly when you're dealing with groups who come from diverse backgrounds and that sort of thing.
All right. Thanks, Laurie. And Malini, please.
Jane, my personal favorite team building activities are the ones that involve play, because when we are playful, we tend to drop our inhibitions, right? And we can form deeply human connections with other people over laughter and over being lighthearted, not taking ourselves overly seriously. So for example, something that I use in my workshops a lot is Lego, and I get people to construct all sorts of interesting shapes. Um, it might be to answer a question: how might we improve collaboration? And they might have I might actually give them some Lego pieces that involves characters from Star Wars or whatever, and they have a great time crafting this narrative, which is hilarious and creative, and it's tactile, right? So it actually works. It works very well to trigger creative thoughts, and it's quite different from what they would normally do at work. So it's not, it's not boring, mundane kind of work activity. It's fun. So anything that actually involves that element of playfulness would be my go-to technique.
All right. Sounds like from Laurie and Malini, like you're pretty much on visualization, which we know is always a good thing to move forward. Let's hear what Daniëlle has to say about this.
Oh, I agree with both of you. And Malini, you said it so beautifully. We need a little bit of storytelling. We need playfulness. And as I'm a systemic thinker, it's nice to do something in a group and see different points of view. And as I said, I think at a question before this question, I used a lot of things, but at the moment I'm very fond of this Mapstyle workshop. It's made from Sebastian Rompa. Is a cartograph. He made the shell maps. And dear younger listeners, I'm that old. I didn't have navigation when I was 18, 19. I had to drive with a map on my lap and find my way. So, and this cartograph, he's also a psychologist. So he put psychology and the maps together. And then we, as a group, we travel over that map. And as we only have limited words to express so many feelings we have that we don't really have the words for. And for me, as a traveler, I love that walking with people over that map. Everyone has a certain spot on the map. The more people who are more extrovert and open, and the more introvert people, and the more go-getters and the doers, and there are the more helpers. And we travel to each other's place and life, and we feel the feeling, what it is being in that place, and we do role plays. And this traveling experience and having fun with each other and telling each other stories about the world we're in, I love that tool. We have so much fun. It gives so much, there are so much feelings coming up. So that's a tool that I, at the moment, love to play and travel through.
All right, thank you. So tools and visualization, playfulness. Panel, you did great. And I want to thank you, our audience, and our producers for the excellent questions today. They were really excellent questions, right? And I think there was a lot people can take away from that. Panel, it's time for your closing remarks. So let me begin with Laurie, please.
All I can say is thank you so much, especially to my fellow panelists, Malini and Daniëlle. I learned so much from you during that session. It was thoroughly enjoyable. So thank you very much, Stephan, for the opportunity to be involved on this very important and thoroughly enjoyable, playful topic. I love it.
All right. Thanks, Laurie. And thanks for being here today. Daniëlle, your thoughts, your closing remarks, please.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Malini and Laurie. And thank you all listeners for your beautiful question. At the end of the day, I think you have to believe in working together. It's not a solo team. We have to have this people first approach. And what unites us across the globe is our quest for meaning and the desire to do good and to do things with other people. And, company is an organization with real human beings of flesh and blood. So let's make it a place where we not only can work with our brain, but also with our hearts, and where we feel safe and seen.
All right, thanks. Nice. Malini, your thoughts and your closing remarks, please.
This is my first APMG Level Up, panel for 2023, and I think it's been a wonderful start. So great to have your company, Daniëlle, Laurie, Stephan, and Suchitra, and to everyone behind the scenes, and of course, everyone who's sent through beautiful questions. If you would like to know a little bit more about how we can actually create or evolve cultures of organization, so we actually have sustained partnerships and collaboration, perhaps you might want to check out the website of the Business Relationship Management Institute.
Which is, yeah, all right. Good, many thanks. Panelists, it was great to have you on the show today. And to our listeners and viewers, if you would like to find more expert answers to audience questions, then head over to our website at apmginternational.com. There you can search through over 1,700 questions from previous shows. It's a comprehensive free resource connecting you with 180 experts from around the world. By the way, you can also listen to the audio versions of the shows on Spotify, Apple, or any other preferred podcast platform. Building a culture of collaboration is such an important topic that we devoted another show to it. And this is coming up this Friday on the 27th of January. And next Monday, on the 30th January, our panel will answer your questions to another hot topic, how to become a change manager. Please subscribe to this show if you like it. It will help us to improve, and we really appreciate that. And we will send you a personal summary of what's coming up and also information about how you could join us here on the panel and level up your career with APMG. Thanks, everyone. See you on the next show. Have a great day. Bye-bye.